Everybody, I'm Shaina Thompson, and as you may have read, my title is kind of a pun on a song. Near, far, wherever you are, Species ID is hard. That's a Celine Dion song from, the Titanic, but I tried to get it so that I could play that for you, but I didn't get the audio going, so here we are, being awkward about it. Where's the mouse? Okay. I evaluated remote sensing and field observations for two invasive plant species, Himalayan blackberry and reed canary grass, at a local preserve, the Deschutes River Preserve. And this came about because habitat restoration projects are generally under-resourced, but extremely important, especially as we face climate change and attempt to reverse the impacts of urbanization on these ecosystems. And mapping invasive species can help significantly plan and prioritize where resources are applied, but we're at a point with the remote sensing technology where it's still pretty difficult to determine or differentiate, I should say, between species. And so there's many studies that have been successful at differentiating specific tree species, but getting into the understory and certainly in herbaceous plants is difficult. This photo is actually Mike Ruth, and I have to give him big credit for my project because I used his data that he collected. He flew the preserve several times actually in 2022, I think as part of his drone class that he teaches over the summer. And so this is a photo of him doing a drone mission at a different place for a different reason, but it's, I guess, just a good example of what that part of this project looks like. And I guess all I would have to say about just remote sensing data and vegetation is that it has been used pretty extensively, like even just satellite data in agricultural applications pretty successfully. But when you get into like urban ecosystems or just very mixed habitats, that can be much more difficult. And so every study and research, there's like hundreds of studies out there trying to determine whether they can use remote sensing to find certain species across a lot of different landscapes. And my study just adds one more example, I guess, of that. I asked, how well does manual interpretation of drone imagery enable accurate measurement and geospatial analysis of these species across mixed habitat types compared to field surveys? And manual interpretation is just looking at it with my eyes and visually analyzing it as a human versus using a computer to do that, which isn't necessarily in some cases any better than a human, but people are working on that. And how do these mapping techniques compare when measuring the distribution of Himalayan blackberry and reed canary grass at the Deschutes River Preserve? And I'll get into a little bit about why I chose those two species specifically. But first, let me orient you all. So this is where the Deschutes River Preserve is located. It's a gorgeous area along the river, and it's at the southeast part of Olympia. And like I mentioned, urbanization has caused many detrimental effects and degradation to this habitat. Riparian habitat is very significant and important in making sure that the aquatic species that live in rivers, the riparian habitat is the habitat along the water. It's really important for protecting many different aspects of the river, things that you wouldn't necessarily think about, like the dissolved oxygen content, the temperature of the river, and all that kind of stuff. And so it's really important and significant to be restoring lands that are along the edges of the river, but even further out into the watershed. And so one piece that I like to call out about the Deschutes River is it connects the Cascades to the Puget Sound. It's a massive watershed. And like, I think of every piece of it, we're all connected as contributing to the health of the ecosystem in the water and on land. Oh, I should also point out that this preserve used to be a dairy farm. And in this photo, you can't really see it, but this is like a field, and there's much more field as part of it. It's the entire preserve is somewhere between 350, 400 acres. So that is significant because reed canary grass is one of my study species, and it was planted as forage for cows and is still planted as forage in many places in the world. So there's a high likelihood that this species was planted on purpose at the Deschutes River Preserve when it was a dairy farm. And so that was just one of the reasons I chose that was the prevalence, but also because you can see here, even after it has senesced, it's like lived its life and died and is just there now. It's very identifiable and visible. It grows very tall, up to 2 meters. Yeah, just it creates a thick sod that makes it really difficult for any other plants to grow in that area. And then I chose Himalayan blackberry because if you've been in the Pacific Northwest, you know that is a pretty aggressive plant. It can be really difficult to remove from an area. And while I personally love blackberries and make jelly in the summer, it is an invasive and it can crowd out. It can even suppress trees from growing. So it's a pretty intense plant. So that's another reason why I chose that plant. Those two plants, I should say. And like I mentioned already, the manual interpretation process is essentially me reviewing the drone imagery and drawing these polygons around the plants that I could identify just looking at the drone imagery. And so this is a screenshot of my drone data layer that shows the reed canary grass polygons in yellow and the Himalayan blackberry in green. And I'll have some examples later on, just kind of showing you the different map scales in terms of what I could see as I was evaluating that. But first I wanted to acknowledge I had a couple classmates help me with my data collection out in the field. And even my dad came out at one point to just be my like safety buddy, because there is a lot of standing water out there. And I did fall in some, but I was wearing chest waders, so I didn't get too wet. So, okay, this provides an example. When I was zoomed in, and of course it's not very zoomed in for you, but you could kind of see this is like the closest I could zoom in. The map scale is set to 1 to 50 meters here. And so this oddly wasn't as clear as when I was zoomed out to 1 to 100 meters. I felt like I could get a little more detail, and it may be difficult to see on the big screen, but this center area is blackberry, to the left is reed canary grass, and to the right is what looks like to be some trees, or maybe one big tree. And one of the challenges that I had when I was doing the manual interpretation is determining, it was almost like a cost benefits analysis of like, if I'm super zoomed in, it's going to take me forever to do all of these polygons. And so I decided ultimately to sacrifice some of the accuracy that I would get by being very zoomed in. And I was zoomed out to 1 to 1,000 meters. So for every 1 unit of this map, that represents 1,000 meters in real life. This made it so that I could draw polygons a little bit faster, but still feel relatively confident that I was capturing the entire blackberry patch or the entire patch of the reed canary grass. And that was a choice that I ended up making as I was like doing this project and determining, okay, what makes the most sense and what is going to be, I guess, like, yeah, achievable with the time that I had and the resources that I have. So originally I set out to do the entire preserve. I did not. I was very surprised by how much water was had basically collected from the time I saw it in the fall to when I went out in February to do my data collection. It was a pretty significant difference. And so I did my best, and I ended up having to choose a subset of my data. And so this is a map of the entire preserve, with the purple being the outline of the boundary. I ended up choosing just a subsection, and this particular screenshot shows the orthomosaic layers that Mike took on the drone. And the reason why it's a gray background is because the rest of it is the nape layer, which is, oh shoot, I'm not gonna remember what this acronym stands for, but basically it's a data set that is readily available on Esri's portal that is used for land cover types. So you can see, I can't zoom in any further, but basically there was imagery that was taken in its satellite imagery that I filled into the gaps there basically. So this picture has Mike's orthomosaics and the satellite imagery, and just because of like the way, the places it was, he offered to go get more drone imagery, but I didn't feel like I needed it for my project. This is that drone screenshot again, and I just wanted to show that again because this is what I ended up collecting in the field. And so for my analysis, I ended up trying to quantify the area of overlap between those two layers. And so what these polygons represent is the intersection. So anywhere a field polygon intersected with a drone polygon for each species, the reed canary grass is yellow and the blackberry is purple, the software calculated the area of that polygon. And this is just like showing all of them combined, as it's kind of crazy looking, but I have a bigger map to kind of focus in on a couple areas that once I was looking at what basically my polygons were showing, I found that the reed canary grass polygons were very much overestimated in the drone imagery, whereas the blackberry was underestimated. And so I also, this is taking a little bit to load, but I also noticed that there were many drone polygons for blackberries. Like there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 drone polygons for every, or not for every, but for this particular field polygon when it came to blackberry. And then my reed canary grass polygons had the opposite, where like my field polygons for reed canary grass were often inside of the drone polygons. So it had kind of an interesting, but that's to be expected because on the ground, I was able to draw my polygons like closer and more realistically to the patches. Whereas when I'm looking at the imagery, I was being pretty, I guess, like broad strokes with my polygon drawing. And that's me out there trying to figure out if I could use a rangefinder to help expedite my data collection, but I could not figure that out. And I will summarize my results for you here. The total area of the drone polygons and the field polygons are displayed here with the total area of the intersections. I think the most interesting data points are the percentages when it comes to the overlap, but also the percent change. And so I'll explain the average overlap. Each polygon is averaged, or sorry, the overlap percentage, the overlap of each polygon is averaged here. So the 37% for the blackberry meant that like they overlapped by 37% in terms of the polygons. The percent change I thought was important to calculate too, because it took into account the entire area of the drone polygon and not just the intersection area. So I just wanted to differentiate between those two percentages since they are very different. But yeah, so like I said earlier, the drone polygons were underestimating blackberry, which was to be expected just simply because of the different habitat types that were present. It's really difficult to see blackberry from the sky if they're under trees. And then the reed canary grass was overestimated. And I believe, I mean, I chalk that up to me being an inexperienced ecologist, not really knowing what reed canary grass looks like on camera, and then having a lot more confidence once I was out in the field and I could see the reed canary grass right in front of me. So I was definitely more, I guess, generous with my polygons when I was drawing them over the imagery than when I was out in the field, where I was doubting myself every step of the way, like, is this reed canary grass? I'm not sure. But overall, I'd just like to say that invasive species are it's going to be constant upkeep, and really important to have, I think, a prioritized approach and an adaptive approach. Adaptive management is a very popular theory in ecology, but at the end of the day, habitat restoration is an act of hope in the face of eco-anxiety and despair about the changing climate. And I think it is worth our further research in figuring out if these tools, this technology, can be leveraged to do it in a more efficient and less expensive way. And yeah, I think that's all. So I'll leave it on that photo because it's a cool photo.